want to introduce uh, Frank and Mona, who will be walking us through our beautiful solution today.
Thanks, Alexa. So our on the screen right now, it just says AmberPod Squad on a white background. Can you go to the next slide? So our group really focused on looking at the community work that was happening across Staten Island already. Part of what we were really trying to outline were the cultural assets across Staten Island and the culturally responsive sustaining pedagogy. So what we did was we looked at organizations that already existed and ways that we could potentially collaborate with some of these organizations. So we started kind of combing through different lists to try to find organizations across Staten Island and resources that currently exist. And we started creating our own list of all of these organizations. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Alexa. And I'm Frank. This slide represents a geometrical representation of a branch with several leaves. And on each leaf is a cultural initiative or an example of a culturally responsive sustaining education model. So upon first examining the bevy of resources that are available, we began to consider how we can map them. We were discussing experiencing, looking at models and information of cultural assets and initiatives happening on Staten Island currently existing. And then we started wondering, would it be helpful to have a container for this that filtered and organized it? So this is where we started, one branch with several leaves. Oh, go back one, sorry. One branch with several leaves, each representing the cultural initiative or culturally responsive sustaining education model. And next slide, please. So the next slide represents, it's an image of just like the last slide, but multiplied by 3 in a fractalized manner. So it just illustrates the expansiveness of the interconnected model. We then began to expand on that model and consider what it would be like if these initiatives, resources, information, and assets were more interconnected. Next slide, please. And so this slide, on the image on this slide is a canopy, is a tree canopy in a forest with perspective from the ground looking up so that you can see the sun poking through between each tree's respective foliage. So before knowing where our community mapping project was going, we examined where we were at exactly. There's so much work happening on Staten Island and still more to be done, obviously. And just like other pods have mentioned, we just want to build upon the existing work and make sure that we're operating in a supplemental manner. So we wondered if to some extent there were parallels with the natural phenomenon known as crown shyness seen in this image where the canopies, again, trees are growing close to one another, but there are gaps and spaces between their foliage. So how can all the players in this space and in their own respective spaces intersect? Next slide, please. And I'll pass it over to Mona.
Thank you, Frank. So this slide has 2 images. The left image is 2 trees, and below the grass, we see the roots kind of connecting as if they're shaking hands. And then the image on the right-hand side is also just a tree, 2 trees with roots. So what we were thinking is, as we kind of went through the weeks of PCCLF, we realized how connected all of our groups were and all of the work that we were doing, and how even the work that we were doing could branch out to include other pods. So part of what we were trying to do is really think about what brings us together and how can we work together collaboratively to really grow what already exists without reinventing the wheel. So because many of us are involved at different colleges around the island and within the education field or have interns, we started thinking about how do we centralize this information? How could we potentially have, use the resources that we have to create a database or a website where all this information would be where anyone can access it. So we started thinking about, two of the pod members work on college campuses. Others are involved with college campuses to some capacity. So we said, we have student workers. Why can't we get Wagner in on this, CSI in on this, St. John's in on this, and we start using the student workers that we have to start creating some sort of database or website that really can that anyone on Staten Island can have access to this information. Additionally, the benefit that we saw was the retention of these students, right? We see a lot of students come to Staten Island, they come to college here, and they leave. They either go out to work elsewhere in New York City, or they leave the state. But we want to try to retain some of the folks who are already in Staten Island. So part of that is, if these students see what's happening on Staten Island, they see the work that's already being done, they'll be more interested in staying to really try to improve and better the community as we move forward, right? So we really wanted to look at all the deep collective impact work that was happening, and then bring, you know, younger generations into that fold. So it was also creating, we've talked about creating a Staten Island Center for Equity and Belonging, which bridged all 3 campuses in some way, and was kind of like that buffer for the community where anyone could really access it and learn about existing assets. And that really was our beautiful solution. Again, we weren't trying to necessarily tell anybody what to do, but we were trying to figure out ways that we could collaborate and really make, you know, a better Staten Island for all of us.